Let's talk about why it's going to be literally impossible for some to buy a car, truck, or SUV in 2024 and even 2025. Some people are going to need 3 years to get out of this major issue. So please follow along to find out how to not get yourself in some major deep water now. And hopefully you didn't get yourself into some major deep water earlier. And if you did, well, watch this episode so you don't get fooled by a dealer that hides your negative equity. Because if you bought a car, truck, or SUV in the last 2 to 3 years, you very well, whether you saw it or not, whether you noticed it or not, sometimes you can hide added fees, especially if it's a lease. A lease you don't see in your contract unless you really go, you take out the calculator and calculate it out. It's almost impossible to find out that you've overpaid for a vehicle. And so many people in the last 3 years have overpaid for a vehicle, a car, truck, or SUV. So I'm begging you, please, praying that people these days don't pay over MSRP for a vehicle, because you're going to get yourself in trouble. You might think this is the last one. I'm going to keep this one for 10 to 15 years. I can tell you most buyers say they're going to keep this one, the current one they're shopping. Oh, I'm going to keep this one. I love it. I'm going to keep it for a really long time, and are back 2-3 years later wanting to switch. And if you bought in the last 2-3 years, you probably paid over MSRP. Very hard to tell if you didn't, but do always ask for a purchase offer or a lease offer, because on the lease offer and the purchase offer, the final contracts on a lease, you don't see it go by the over MSRP, but on a lease offer or a purchase offer, you're gonna see it. You're gonna see if they're adding $4,000 or $5,000 in whatever it may be, market adjustment fee, dealer fee, administration fee, document fee, whatever they're calling it, folks. Don't pay over MSRP, because when you want to switch that vehicle, let's talk about people that bought a vehicle 2 years ago for $15,000 over MSRP. And now let's say it was, whether it was a Ram truck, whether it was a Jeep, a Bronco, a Ford F-150. Let's say it was a Ram. Then you're in big trouble. Let's say you paid $10,000 over MSRP for a Ram. And now let's say Ram has a $10,000 manufacturer rebate. And Ram has a lot of Ram 1500s for sale. We can see it. They've, over the year, they didn't sell what they needed to sell in Ram 1500s. So it's a great example. They've got a lot sitting around on lots. So the manufacturer, to help dealers move that metal, will put, a $10,000 rebate on it. So if you paid $10,000 over and now they've got a $10,000 rebate, right there, right off, you got $20,000 negative equity compared to a new. But of course, when either you sell your vehicle yourself or the dealer takes it in on as a trade, well, the used vehicle, the 2-year-old vehicle with a used monthly payment with higher interest than new can't cost more per month than the new vehicle. So that's why the dealer has to. It's not because they're bad people. They have to buy it at a price where when they go to sell your used vehicle, it's going to be less of a monthly payment than a new one. And that's how you end up with $30,000 of negative equity. So if you're shopping a vehicle right now, please do not get it. And I use the Ram pickup not because I'm mean to Ram, but you see it right here, year-to-date change. So year-to-date change, Ram lost 5% compared to a year ago in Ram pickup sales. That's rough. Now, Ford, for the month of December, lost 5% compared to the month before, but year over year, they're up 14%. Well, with, let's say, Ford F-Series production went up by 30% or 40%, that's where you get those extra F-Series sitting around at Ford lots because, well, production was higher than sales. And so many YouTubers look at this. Don't be fooled. They go into Ford lots and they don't like data. They're allergic to it. It's wild. It's like peanuts in an elementary school. People lose their crap. I'm losing my crap because I'm going to BS bust this. So many YouTubers go into Ford lots and go, look at all these Ford trucks for sale. Nobody's buying them. And they get their, 200,000 to 1 million views. So they get their $2,000 to $20,000. And they don't care that they just very inaccurately. They didn't go in depth enough to actually look. They just looked at the surface, like the surface of an iceberg. Tiny little iceberg sticking up. Oh, it's nothing. Let's go drive into it. Let's run it over. Ha, it's just a little bit of ice floating around. And then there's an iceberg underneath the water. While so many YouTubers don't look, and even big media does this all the time, but they don't look what's under the surface. And I'll tell you what's under the surface. It's simple. Ford produced way more F-Series in 23 than they did in 2022. So many more. Production went up 14%, 14.8%. We can round that off to 15%. That's incredible. That's a great 2023 compared to 2022. But because production was much higher than an additional 15% from 22, at 15%, there'd be essentially no F-Series left available on lots right now. But they must have increased production by, let's say, 40%. And that difference between 15 and 40 becomes inventory on lot. So it drives me crazy when these big YouTubers making tons of money get away fooling people with comments like Ford can't sell trucks, Ram can't sell trucks, Jeep can't sell trucks, GMC can't sell trucks, Silverados aren't selling, blah, blah, blah. They're just picking on the nerve that we're all frustrated that groceries and the cost of living have gone up significantly. Groceries are the worst. We're looking at 2 to 3 times more than what we were paying 2 years ago. It's ridiculous. The government continues to print off money when that is the main source of inflation, because our spending as consumers, we're cutting it back. And they're not cutting back the printing off of money. Just when things start to maybe be getting better, they're just going to start printing it out again and sending money all over when we have so many poor people, homeless vets, homeless people in general. More and more, both Canada and the US are having issues with illegal immigrants filling cities, and the government's printing off money for them, somehow not taking care very well of our own homeless, and we're sending money overseas all over the place. This printing of money raises inflation dramatically. And I know, unless it's part of a major plan, so many mortgages in Canada are going to be due. And within the next year, so many mortgages are going to be due. And let's say on average, 15% of all mortgages are due within the next year and a half. Well, if interest rates don't go down, a big chunk of those people are going to have to sell their house. And unfortunately, unless it's fortunate and unfortunate. Fortunate for them that there'll be a buyer, quite possibly an LLC, so a company, but BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are pumping trillions of dollars into the single family home business. They're going to be buying up houses. There's certain regions where already 40% of all purchases are done by an LLC. And most of the time you trace that LLC back to its true owner, and it's one of those 3 major companies. It's coincidentally, part of the World Economic Forum that within a short amount of time, there'll be no home ownership. That's part of being able to own things, make choices, advance your quality of life, not be stuck as a lifelong renter. It's part of the dream. It's part of being in a system that actually has liberty. If you don't have choices, you don't have liberty. So I think it's sad that there's an actual group allowed to continue to function where their main goal is to remove home ownership and vehicle ownership from people. But I'm picking on Ram because they're down 5%. When production goes up by about 40% and you're down by 5% year to year in sales, well, that means there's a lot of these Rams sticking around on lots. And, well, it's not that they're not selling at all. They're just not selling very well. And this means if they're not selling very well because of dealers putting a ton of pressure on the manufacturer to say, look, we're tired of paying interest on all these Ram 1500s sitting around. What's going to happen? The manufacturer is going to make a better deal, meaning either or they'll either make a big rebate, or they'll go for a much better interest rate, or it'll be a combination of better interest rate and better rebate. And what do we get then? We get your trade-in going down in value again. This is why it's going to be impossible for so many to change vehicles this year, next year, or the year after, because they're just going to be trying to get their amount owing down on their vehicle. I remember Ford F-150s, a 3-year-old Ford F-150 that would trade in at 43 Canadian dollars a year ago, $43,000. Now the trade-in is like $11,000 less. Trade-ins have dropped by a solid, almost basically 40% in value. Yes, the World Economic Forum, the slogan for them, and what they're trying to aim at is that we'll rent everything, own nothing, and apparently we'll be happy. Apparently we're just going to love losing our freedom, and apparently we'll just love getting free money from the government for our bare necessities. Who knows what employment will look like that. Thank you, Ford Video Guy, for making it in. Ridgeview, thank you so much. Folks, really appreciate you sticking with us as we move forward. So vehicles that are going to be hard to get a great deal on. Well, look at the Toyota RAV4 at 18.6% sales. Better sales in 23 than in 22. So that means for 2024, trying to get a great deal on a RAV4, it's going to be a little harder because they're selling really well. Honda CR-V, 51.77% increase. Good luck getting a good deal on a Honda CR-V. GMC Sierra, also 22.45% increase in sales. The Toyota Camry, they're down in sales, so you can probably get a good deal, a little rebate on a Toyota Camry. Nissan Rogue sales way up, so probably hard to get a good deal on one, but I personally wouldn't want to buy a Nissan Rogue CVT transmission. I don't find them to be unbelievably reliable in my opinion. So you can get this list and figure out what models you can probably expect the best deals on. You can get it over at the 2023 US auto sales figures by model, all vehicles ranked over at goodcarbadcar.net. So check that out, folks. That is a good indicator of what vehicles you can expect to get kind of a good deal on. However, there's some little tricky ones like the Ford Explorer here, down 10% from 22 to 23. You can think, hey, that means I should be able to get a great deal on a 2024. It was actually down because production was down throughout 2023. As a dealer, we almost never had any Explorers available. Now we finally have Explorers available. Ford doesn't have to make a huge discount on them to get one. Toyota Highlander, same thing, very hard to find in 2023. So it's down 23% in sales. Not because the Ford Explorer or Toyota Highlander are bad vehicles. They're fantastic vehicles. Both hold their value quite well over a long period of time. But those sales numbers are way down because production never came back up on those models. Now the Jeep Wrangler production really came up over the course of a year, and they're still down 14.29%. So do not buy a Jeep Wrangler unless it is a crazy good deal, because those are just sitting around collecting dirt and dust on lots. So you need to get a great deal on that model, because you need to think about trade-in value 2 to 3 years down the road. Ford Bronco Sport up 28%. So that's a really nice increase, but there's so many available that you can easily get one of these at MSRP, and Ford is going to put a special rebate on it from month to month. Either you'll see a nice rebate or maybe no rebate, but a really low interest rate. So that covers that list right there. We can always get into more details about model by model if there's some serious interest shown towards that in the comments section. But it's going to be literally impossible for some to buy a car, truck, or SUV in 2024 because they bought over MSRP within the last 3 years. Definitely do not buy over MSRP now, because when you go to trade it in, now that inventory is on pretty much every model, we're flooded with inventory, it's going to be wildly negative for you. You're going to have what's called negative equity, meaning your amount owing or the amount you paid for the vehicles way up here, and whether you sell it yourself or your trade in, it's going to be way down here. And that difference, the 10, 15, even up to $30,000 of negative equity, banks are going to say, no, we don't take on negative equity. And manufacturers, their financing departments are going to refuse you. So you're either going to have a thick stack of cash to make a deal happen, or it's going to be impossible for you to trade. So I'm sorry to announce that, but I'm talking about it because, at least with you knowing that now, you can save thousands now if you're in the car market, car, SUV, or truck market. whether it's Ford, Dodge, GM, Ram, one of the European brands, Audi, Mercedes, BMW, one of the Japanese brands, really like Toyota, Subaru, Kia, Hyundai, whatever you're looking at, Korean, whatever you're looking at, keep that in mind. That's really must-know information, folks, to save you thousands of dollars. Now, I'm Johnny from Johnny's Car Care and Reviews, and please, I'd love it if you could hit that thumbs up button, share this information with people that need to know it, and please hit the bell notification so you don't miss out. And when you do all that, you help feed and dress a poodle and the new daughter, because it turns out babies are expensive. It is wild. So please help this small family business out. Now, if you're watching this as a mini episode, click here or here for another episode or playlist, because that will really help get this information and channel out to more people, because we do work really hard to keep everyone informed on the must-know information. Now let's talk about slowest and best selling cars on the market, and that means cars, trucks, SUVs